We're not going to spend money on that circus." That was what my daughter, Susan, said when I reminded her that my 70th birthday was only 3 weeks away. 70 years! A whole life waiting to celebrate that date with the people I loved most. But there was her message, cold as ice, shining on the screen of my cell phone. I was in the kitchen, baking oatmeal cookies, when the phone vibrated on the table. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked up the device. It was a message from Susan. My heart leaped with hope for an instant, thinking that maybe she was writing to confirm the party details. How naive I was. "Mom, I spoke with Mark, and we decided we're not going to do your party. Honestly, we're not going to spend money on that circus. You know how things are." I read the message once, then twice, 3 times. The letters started to blur, not from my tears but from disbelief. That circus? Is that what my own daughter called my 70th birthday? Before I could reply, another message arrived, this time from Mark, my son-in-law. "Carol, with all due respect, you're not at an age for parties anymore. It's better to celebrate at home, without so much expense or drama." I just stood there, in the middle of my kitchen, holding that phone as if it were a foreign object. The aroma of the baking cookies filled the air, but I couldn't smell it anymore. I couldn't feel anything but a strange emptiness in my chest. 70 years. All my life I had waited for this moment. Not because I wanted a lavish party or expensive gifts. No, I just wanted to gather my family, to look at the faces of the people who had been my reason for living for decades, and to celebrate that I was still here, that I had made it this far, that all the effort had been worth it. But to my daughter, it was a circus. And for my son-in-law, I was too old to exist in that way. I left the phone on the table and sat down slowly in one of the wicker chairs I had bought 20 years ago at a downtown flea market. I looked out the window. The afternoon sun was falling warmly on the geraniums on the balcony. Everything seemed so normal, so peaceful. But inside me, something was beginning to break. It wasn't a loud shatter. It wasn't a scream or an uncontrolled cry. It was something worse. It was the icy silence of someone who finally understands they've been living a lie. For 69 years, I had been Carol Anderson, mother, grandmother, friend, the woman who was always there when someone needed her, the one who gave without expecting anything in return, the one who sacrificed her own happiness to see others smile. And now, on the verge of my 70th birthday, I discovered that all that unconditional love had a price that, apparently, my daughter was no longer willing to pay. I replied with a short message, as simple as it was painful. No problem. 2 words. Nothing more. I wasn't going to beg them. I wasn't going to explain how much it hurt. I wasn't going to grovel for a little of their time or their affection. Simply, no problem. I turned off the oven. The cookies were a little burnt around the edges, but I didn't care anymore. I left them there, on the hot tray, while I sat in that silent kitchen, feeling the world I had built for 7 decades begin to crumble. Because that message wasn't just about a canceled party. It was about years of invisibility, about being seen only as an open wallet, as a solution to others' problems, as someone who existed to serve, but not to be celebrated. And as the sun continued to set over my geraniums, I began to remember everything I had done for them, every sacrifice, every check signed, every dream of mine that I had put in a drawer so they could fulfill theirs. My memory took me back 25 years, when Susan was 20 years old and dreamed of studying architecture. I worked as a secretary in a government office, a modest job that barely covered our basic expenses. Her father had died 2 years earlier, leaving us alone and with debts that seemed like impossible mountains to climb. But when Susan got into college, I took a second job. I cleaned offices at night, from 9 o'clock at night until 3 o'clock in the morning. I would come home with my hands cracked from the bleach, with my back aching, with my feet swollen. But every month, without fail, I paid my daughter's tuition, 5 full years. 60 months working double shifts so she could graduate without debt, without worries, without having to sacrifice her studies for money. When she finally graduated, I cried with happiness at the ceremony. I watched her walk across the stage in her black cap and gown, receive that diploma that had cost us so much, and I thought it had all been worth it. I thought my sacrifice had built something beautiful. Then came Mark. They met at an architecture firm where they both worked. He was charming at first, attentive to me, always with a polite smile. But I noticed something in his eyes that unsettled me, a kind of cold calculation behind every kind gesture. They got married 3 years after they met. I paid for half the wedding, $8,000 that I had saved for years, tucked away in a cookie tin in the back of my closet. Money I was going to use to fix the roof of my house, which leaked every time it rained. But Susan wanted a beautiful wedding, and I wanted to see her happy. 2 years later, when they decided to buy their first house, I gave them the down payment, $15,000. My entire severance package from work, everything they had given me when I took early retirement due to downsizing. I gave them that money without a second thought, because they were my family, because it was my duty to help them start their life together. Mark promised they would pay me back. As soon as we stabilize our finances, Carol, I promise. That was 18 years ago. I never saw a single dollar of it back. Then Chloe was born, my granddaughter, a beautiful baby with big eyes and a contagious laugh. I watched her every day while Susan and Mark worked. From the time she was 3 months old until she started kindergarten. 5 full years of being her second mother, changing diapers, preparing bottles, singing lullabies at 3 o'clock in the morning. They never paid me for it, not 1 cent. Because she was my granddaughter, because it was my obligation as a grandmother. That's how they made me feel, as if my time was worthless, as if my days and nights were an infinite resource they could take without giving anything in return. Now Chloe is 22 years old and studying medicine at a private university. Who pays the tuition? I do. $1,200 a month that comes straight from my pension. Susan convinced me 4 years ago. Mom, you know how important education is. We don't want Chloe to be in debt like other young people. You understand, right? And I understood, as I have always understood, as I have always said yes. I also pay for Susan's private health insurance, $350 a month, because the insurance from her job doesn't cover everything she needs. Mark earns double what she does, but somehow that expense always ends up falling on my shoulders. And then there's the credit card. The additional card I gave her 10 years ago just for emergencies. Susan uses it for everything. Clothes, restaurants, weekend trips, new furniture for her house. Every month the statement arrives, and I see figures that hurt my soul. $500, $800, sometimes $1,000 in purchases that are never emergencies. But I pay. I always pay. Because I'm afraid to say no. Afraid they'll push me away. Afraid of losing the only thing I have left in this world. My family. The phone vibrated again on the table. Another message from Susan. Mom, are you mad? Don't be dramatic, please. It's just a party. We can do something simple another day. Something simple another day. As if my life could be postponed. As if I were an errand that could be put off until later. I looked at that message and felt something new. Something I had never felt toward my own daughter. Resentment, pure and crystalline. And with that resentment came a terrible clarity. I had been a fool for too long. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of my bedroom, listening to the ticking of the wall clock that had belonged to my mother. Every second that passed was like a reminder of all the time I had wasted being convenient for others. I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and walked barefoot to the living room. I turned on the small corner lamp, the one that casts a warm, yellowish light, and sat on the worn-out sofa where I had spent so many nights waiting for Susan to come home from her outings when she was a teenager. On the coffee table was an old shoebox. I opened it slowly, as if it held something sacred. And, in a way, it did. It was photographs. Hundreds of photographs documenting a lifetime of unconditional love and silent sacrifice. The first photo I picked up was of Susan at 6 years old. She was in the yard of our old house, the one I had to sell after my husband died. She was wearing a pink dress that I had sewn myself, with ruffles on the sleeves and a bow at the waist. She was smiling, showing the gap where her first tooth had fallen out. I remembered that day perfectly. It was her birthday. We didn't have money for a big party, but I had made her a homemade chocolate cake with strawberries on top. I invited her little friends from school and organized games in the yard. Susan was the happiest girl in the world that day. When did she stop caring about my happiness in the same way I cared about hers? I kept looking through the photographs. One from her high school graduation, where she was hugging me so tightly she almost knocked me over. Another from her wedding, where I was by her side helping her fix the veil that had gotten tangled in her hair. One more from when Chloe was born, where I was holding my newborn granddaughter with tears in my eyes. In all those photos I was there, always present, always smiling, always giving. But now, when I needed someone to be there for me, when I wanted to celebrate surviving 70 years in this difficult world, it turned out it was too much to ask. I left the photos and walked to the small desk I have by the window. I opened the bottom drawer, the one I almost never open because it hurts to see what's inside. I pulled out a worn folder with the title Family Expenses written in my handwriting on the cover. Inside was everything. Every receipt, every transfer confirmation, every bank statement documenting decades of financial help. I had always been organized with money, even when I didn't have much. I kept everything, not to hold it over them, but because it was my way of maintaining control over something in my life. I started going through the papers with a mix of sadness and astonishment. The numbers began to dance in front of my eyes, adding up in my head like a relentless calculator. Susan's college. $45,000 in total, between tuition, books, materials, and living expenses. Her wedding, $8,000. The down payment on their house, $15,000. 5 years of watching Chloe without pay. If I had charged what any babysitter charged back then, it would be approximately $52,000. Chloe's college tuition, which I've been paying for 4 years, $57,600. Susan's health insurance for the last 10 years, $42,000. The credit card she uses for emergencies. I had run the numbers 6 months ago in a moment of distress, and it already totaled over $38,000 accumulated over all these years, not counting the small loans that were never repaid, the $500 to fix their car, the $1,200 to replace the refrigerator, the $800 to pay one of Mark's traffic tickets, the $300 for expensive school supplies for Chloe. I added it up mentally, even though it pained me. More than $250,000 over 25 years. $250,000. I, who had worked my whole life earning a modest salary. I, who had given up traveling, replacing my old car, fixing the leaks in my roof, buying new clothes, or treating myself to even a small luxury. $250,000 that I had given with love, thinking I was building bridges. Without knowing that, I was only digging my own grave of invisibility. And now they couldn't even spend money on that circus that was my birthday. I closed the folder and put it back in the drawer. But something had changed in me during that sleepless night. It wasn't just pain I felt. It was something more powerful, something more dangerous. It was clarity. The brutal clarity of someone who finally sees the truth without the filters of blind love and maternal guilt. They didn't see me as a mother. They saw me as a resource, an inexhaustible source of money and free services, an ATM with feelings they could ignore whenever they wanted. I went back to bed as the sky was beginning to lighten, but I didn't try to sleep anymore. I lay there, watching the dawn light filter through the cheap curtains I had bought on sale 5 years ago because I couldn't afford better ones. And then I made a decision. If to them I was just a means to get what they needed, then that means was about to run dry. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to scream or demand. I wasn't going to beg for their attention or affection. I was simply going to turn off the faucet that had been flowing in only one direction for far too long. I got out of bed with a determination I hadn't felt in years. I showered, got dressed in slacks and a simple blouse, and tied my hair back in a low bun. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw a 69-year-old woman who had grown old giving everything to others. But I also saw something else. I saw a woman who still had time to live for herself. I grabbed my purse, put all the important documents I would need inside, and walked out of my apartment with my back straight and my jaw set. First stop, the bank. I walked into the branch at 9 o'clock in the morning, just as they were opening the doors. The account manager, A young woman named Patricia, who always treated me kindly, greeted me with a smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Anderson. How can I help you today?" I sat down across from her desk and pulled out my bank card. "I need to cancel an additional credit card that is in my daughter's name, Susan Rodriguez. I also need to cancel all the automatic transfers I have scheduled." Patricia blinked, surprised by the firmness in my voice. "Of course, Mrs. Anderson. Is there any problem with the accounts?" "There's no problem," I replied calmly. "I'm just making necessary adjustments. It took us 40 minutes to complete the entire process." Patricia showed me each automatic transfer on her computer screen, and I nodded my head each time she asked if I was sure I wanted to cancel it. $1,200 a month for Chloe's university. Canceled. $350 for Susan's health insurance. Canceled. The additional credit card with a current balance of $2,300. Blocked and canceled. When we finished, Patricia looked at me with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Are you sure about all this, Mrs. Anderson? These are major changes." I looked her directly in the eye. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I walked out of the bank feeling strangely light, as if I had taken off a heavy coat I had been wearing for decades. The sun was shining on the street, and for the first time in a long time, I felt I could breathe deeply without my chest hurting. I walked to a nearby coffee shop and sat by the window. I ordered a latte and a slice of carrot cake, something I normally wouldn't allow myself because it was an unnecessary expense. But at that moment, I realized that I deserved small pleasures too. While I sipped my coffee, I took out my phone. I had 3 messages from Susan. "Mom, is your tantrum over? Mark says you're overreacting. It's just a party, it's not a big deal. Are you going to ignore me now?" I didn't answer. I simply put the phone back in my purse and continued enjoying my coffee because I had discovered something powerful in those last 24 hours. My silence was worth more than 1,000 words. The next few days passed in a strange calm. I followed my normal routine, waking up early, making my coffee, watering the plants on the balcony, reading the newspaper. But there was something different in the air, a kind of silent anticipation, like when you know a storm is coming but the sky is still clear. Susan didn't write to me again for 3 whole days. I guess she expected me to make the first move, to apologize for my tantrum, to go back to being the submissive, accommodating mother I had always been. I didn't. On the 4th day, the first sign that things were changing arrived. It was Thursday afternoon when I received a call from Susan. Not a text, a real call. I looked at the screen vibrating in my hand and let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello, Mom." Her voice sounded tense, controlled. "We need to talk." "I'm listening." "I just got an email from Chloe's university. They said this month's payment was declined. You forgot to make the transfer." I leaned back on the sofa and looked out the window. A bird had landed on the balcony railing. "I didn't forget, Susan. I canceled the automatic transfer." There was a silence on the other end of the line. A heavy, disbelieving silence. "You did? What?" "I canceled all the automatic transfers, and I also blocked the additional credit card you had." "Mom, have you lost your mind? How could you do something like that without consulting us?" The word consulting made me laugh, a bitter laugh that didn't leave my throat. "Susan, did you consult me before you canceled my birthday party? Did you consult me before you called it that circus? For God's sake, Mom, one thing has nothing to do with the other. We're talking about your granddaughter's education. You're going to punish Chloe for something I said? I'm not punishing anyone. I am simply reorganizing my finances. At 69 years old, I think I have the right to decide what I do with my own money. But you've always paid for Chloe's college. You can't just leave us hanging like this." "Of course I can. It's my money, Susan. My pension. Just because I decided to help you for years doesn't mean I'm obligated to do it for the rest of my life." I heard her breathing heavily on the other end of the line. I could picture her in her modern kitchen, with her stainless steel appliances that I had helped pay for, gripping the phone tightly. "Mark was right," she said finally, her tone icy. "He said you were going to be dramatic and vengeful. This is because we canceled your party, isn't it? You're throwing a childish tantrum." Something broke inside me with those words. It wasn't pain. It was liberation. Think whatever you want, Susan, but things are going to change from now on. Mom, listen to me. If you don't pay for Chloe's university this month, she's going to lose the semester. Is that what you want? To ruin your granddaughter's future over a whim? Chloe's future is her parents' responsibility. You both work. You have good salaries. You can pay for her education yourselves. We can't. We have the mortgage, the house expenses, Mark's new car. We can't afford an extra $1,200 a month. Then you'll have to make adjustments, like I've done my entire life to help you. Mom, please. Don't be like this. You know we need you. There it was. The naked, raw truth. They needed me. Not loved me, not valued me, not respected me. They needed me. Like one needs an ATM or a credit card. Goodbye, Susan. I hung up before she could respond. The phone immediately started ringing again, but I put it on silent and left it on the table. I sat there, feeling my heart pound in my chest. I had been tough. I had been firm. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for setting boundaries. I couldn't eat dinner that night. I made myself a chamomile tea and sat on the balcony, wrapped in an old blanket, watching the city lights turn on one by one. The cool night air brushed against my face, and I closed my eyes, trying to find peace in the middle of the chaos I had just unleashed. I knew what would come next. I knew this was just the beginning. And I was right. The next day, Friday morning, my doorbell rang at 8 o'clock sharp. I was making a simple breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast. I left the pan on the stove and walked to the door. When I opened it, Mark was standing there. Tall, in his gray work suit, his hair slicked back with gel, and that expression he always used when he wanted to intimidate someone, a mix of superiority and condescension. "Good morning, Carol. Mark." I didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway, blocking his entry with my body. "I need to talk to you. It'll only take 5 minutes. Say what you have to say from there." He sighed, as if he were dealing with a stubborn child. "Carol, I know you're upset about the party," Susan told me. "And look, maybe I was a little harsh with my words. But you have to understand that we're going through a tough financial time." "Oh, really? I didn't know. I thought you were doing very well with your architecture jobs." "We do well, but we have a lot of expenses. The house is big. It needs maintenance. Susan's car is old. We need to replace it soon. And Chloe is in an expensive university because you insisted she go to the best. I didn't insist on anything. You chose that university. And I agreed to help, not to pay for everything for the rest of my life." Mark took a step forward, closing the distance between us. His voice became deeper, more threatening. "Listen to me, Carol. You can't just leave us hanging like this. We've built our life counting on your support. You can't just take it away overnight because your feelings got hurt." "Of course I can. It's my money. That money is for the family, for your granddaughter. What kind of grandmother denies her own granddaughter an education?" I felt the anger start to boil in my stomach. Anger for years of manipulation, of being seen as an obligation and not as a person. The kind of grandmother who is tired of being used. The kind of grandmother who finally realized that to you, she's only valuable when she's handing out money. You're being ridiculous and selfish. Susan is a wreck. She's been crying for 2 days because of you. How interesting. She cries because I canceled the payments, but she didn't cry when she canceled my birthday. She didn't cry when she called it a circus. Mark clenched his jaw. I could see him trying to control his temper. "You know what, Carol? Do whatever you want. But don't come crying to us later when you're all alone in this miserable apartment, with no one to visit you, no one who remembers you. Because that's how you'll end up if you keep this up. Alone and abandoned." His words tried to pierce my armor, to find that vulnerable part of me that had always been afraid of loneliness, of abandonment, of not being loved. But something had changed. I had changed. I'd rather be alone than be with people who only want me when they need something. Now get away from my door, Mark. And don't come back without being invited. I closed the door in his face before he could answer. My hands were shaking as I slid the deadbolt. I heard his footsteps retreating down the hall, heavy and furious. I leaned against the closed door and took a deep breath. My heart was beating like a runaway drum, but I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel scared. I felt powerful, because I had just discovered something fundamental. The respect they had never given me, I could give to myself. I went back to the kitchen. My scrambled eggs had gotten cold, but I didn't care. I ate them anyway, sitting by the window, watching life go on as normal on the street below. And as I ate, I thought about all the times I had given in, all the times I had said yes when I wanted to say no, all the times I had put others' needs before my own. Those days were over. The circus was closed, and I was no longer going to be the clown. The following days were a strange mix of peace and tension. On one hand, I felt a freedom I hadn't experienced in decades. On the other, I knew the storm was just beginning to form on the horizon. For a full week, I heard nothing from Susan or Mark. The silence was deafening, but also revealing. It confirmed what I already suspected. When there was no money involved, I simply didn't exist to them. I used that silence to do something I had put off for years: live for myself. On Monday, I went to the hair salon and got a new haircut. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle change that made me feel refreshed. The stylist, a cheerful woman named Rosa, told me I looked 10 years younger. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who was beginning to recognize herself. On Tuesday, I went to the antique market I had always wanted to visit but never had time for. I walked among the stalls filled with objects with history, touching the old wood of the furniture, smelling the scent of used books. I bought a small, hand-painted ceramic vase, cream-colored with delicate flowers. It cost $25, and normally I would have thought it was an unnecessary expense. But that day, I bought it without guilt. On Wednesday, I called my friend Aurora, whom I had lost touch with in recent years because I was always too busy helping Susan with something. Aurora was 68, a widow like me, and lived alone in a small apartment on the other side of town. "Carol, what a surprise to hear from you. I thought you'd forgotten about me," she said in that warm tone she always had. "Forgive me, Aurora. I've been lost for a long time. Are you okay? You sound different." And then, without planning to, I told her everything. The canceled party, the hurtful message, the years of financial help, my decision to turn off the money faucet. It all came out of me like a flood that had been held back for too long. Aurora listened in silence, and when I finished, she sighed deeply. "Oh, Carol, you should have done this years ago. I told you, remember? About 5 years ago, when you told me you'd paid the down payment on their house. I told you, you have to set boundaries. I know, you were right, but I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of losing them? Of being alone? But my dear friend, did you really have them? Because from what you're telling me, they were never there for you. Only your money was." Her words were a necessary reality check. Aurora had that ability to speak uncomfortable truths with love. "Come over for coffee tomorrow," she said before hanging up. "We have a lot to talk about, and I have a lot to tell you, too. Life doesn't end at 70, Carol. It's just beginning." I hung up the phone feeling lighter. Having an ally, someone who understood me without judgment, was something I didn't know how much I needed until that moment. On Thursday afternoon, as I was getting ready to visit Aurora, the second attack came. This time it wasn't Mark at my door. It was something much more painful. The doorbell rang at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. When I opened it, Chloe was standing there. My granddaughter. My beautiful, 22-year-old granddaughter, with her big eyes that had always reminded me of her grandfather, my late husband. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt from her university. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. "Grandma," she said softly. My heart clenched in my chest. Of all the people who could come to attack me, she was the one who had the power to make me doubt my decision. "Chloe, my love, please, come in." We went into the living room and sat on the sofa. I offered her water, coffee, something to eat, but she shook her head. She was nervous, fidgeting with her hands in her lap. "Grandma, I came to talk to you about what happened. Did your parents send you?" She hesitated for a moment, and that hesitation gave me the answer. "Mom is really upset. She says you stopped paying for my college and that I'm going to fail this semester. Dad says you've become selfish overnight. I felt the anger start to boil up inside me again. Of course they had sent her. They knew Chloe was my weak spot, my Achilles heel. Chloe, look at me. I waited for her to look up. What do you think? I don't know what to think, Grandma. I'm confused. Mom says you canceled her party out of spite, and now you're punishing all of us. Is that what she told you? That it was just a party? Chloe nodded slowly. I took a deep breath before speaking. I had to be careful. I didn't want to use my granddaughter as a weapon against her parents, but I also wasn't going to let them paint me as the villain. Chloe, do you know how many years I've been paying for your college? 4 years. And do you know how much I've paid in total? She shook her head, biting her lower lip. $57,600. $1,200 every month for 48 months. Her eyes widened in surprise. I could see she had never done the math, never really thought about the magnitude of that sacrifice. Grandma, I didn't know it was that much. Not only that, my love, your entire childhood, I took care of you without ever getting paid a cent. 5 full years of being your full-time nanny while your parents worked. Do you know how much a nanny costs? Chloe started to shake her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I also paid for your mother's college. I paid for half of her wedding. I gave the down payment on the house you live in. I've been paying for your mom's health insurance for 10 years. And I've paid thousands of dollars on the credit card she uses for emergencies that are never emergencies. Grandma, I had no idea. No one has any idea, Chloe, because when you give in silence, people get used to receiving without being grateful. It becomes an expectation, not a gift. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. But, Grandma, I need to finish my degree. I only have 2 years left. If I lose this semester, I'll fall behind. I know, my love, and I don't want you to lose your education. But why does it have to be my responsibility? Your parents work. They both earn good salaries. They can pay for your university. They say they can't, that they don't have enough. Chloe, your father has a new car that cost $45,000. A luxury car he bought 6 months ago. Your mother just took a trip to Cancun with her friends that cost $3,000. But it turns out they don't have $1,200 a month for their daughter's education. I saw the realization dawning in her eyes. It was painful to watch her awaken to the truth about her own parents. But it was necessary. I didn't know about the car. Dad said he needed it for work. Chloe, listen to me. I love you with all my heart. You are one of the most important people in my life. But I can't keep being the family bank while they spend on luxuries, and I live on the bare minimum. So, what am I going to do? Her voice broke. I can't pay for college on my own. I work part-time at the university coffee shop, but it's barely enough for my personal expenses. There are student loans. There are scholarships. There are options. But the responsibility of finding those options should be yours and your parents', not mine. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry. I put my arm around her, feeling her body tremble against mine. It hurt to see her like this. It hurt my soul. But I knew that if I gave in now, if I opened my wallet again out of guilt, everything would go back to the way it was. I'm so sorry, Grandma, she sobbed against my shoulder. I'm sorry Mom and Dad treated you like this. I'm sorry I didn't realize it sooner. It's not your fault, my love. You are not responsible for your parents' decisions. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other on the sofa in my small living room, as the afternoon sun filtered through the curtains. When she finally pulled away, Chloe wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Grandma? Yes, my love. Is it true they canceled your birthday party? I nodded. Mom said it was because they didn't have time, but Dad said something about it being an unnecessary expense. Your mom called it, "That's Circus." And your dad said I wasn't at an age for parties anymore. Chloe closed her eyes tightly, as if the words physically pained her. That's horrible. I can't believe they said that. Well, they did. She was silent for a moment, then looked at me with determination. Grandma, I didn't just come here because they sent me. I also came because I wanted to apologize. I knew about your party. Mom told me they were going to cancel it, and I didn't say anything. I didn't defend you, and that makes me just as guilty as they are." Her words moved me deeply. To see that level of maturity and honesty in someone so young gave me hope. "Chloe, the fact that you are here, saying this, already means so much to me." "No, Grandma, it's not enough. I've been part of the problem. I've accepted your money without questioning it, without truly thanking you, without thinking about what it means to you. You're my granddaughter. It's natural for me to want to help you, but there's a difference between helping and being used. And I think my parents crossed that line a long time ago." I looked at her with pride. In the midst of all this chaos, she was showing an integrity that her parents seemed to have lost somewhere along the way. "You know what I'm going to do, Grandma," she said, straightening her back. "I'm going to look for student loans. I'm going to apply for more scholarships. And I'm going to get a second job if I have to. I'm not going to let you use your pension to support me." Chloe's words filled me with such a deep emotion that I had to hold back my own tears. My granddaughter, at 22, was showing more maturity and dignity than her own parents. "Chloe, you don't have to do this alone. We can look for options together. I can help you research scholarships, fill out forms, but you're right, I can't keep carrying all the financial responsibility." She nodded, wiping the last of her tears from her cheeks. "Grandma, can I ask you something? Anything, my love? Were you really going to have a party? Or did you just want to get everyone together?" The question took me by surprise. I leaned back on the sofa and looked at the ceiling, searching for the right words. I didn't want a big party. I just wanted a dinner, something simple. I wanted everyone to be there, at the same table, sharing food and laughter. I wanted to feel that after 70 years in this world, I had built something worthwhile, a united family that truly loved each other. "I'm so sorry, Grandma. They had no right to cancel that. And they certainly had no right to call it that. It's in the past now, Chloe. The important thing now is to look forward." She stayed a little longer, and before she left, she hugged me tightly. "I love you, Grandma, and I'm going to come visit you more often, not just when I need something. I promise." "I love you too, my girl." When I closed the door behind her, I leaned against the wood and finally let out the tears I had been holding in. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of hope. Because at least one person in my family saw me as more than just a source of money. That night, I received 5 calls from Susan. I didn't answer any of them. Then the messages started, one after another, an avalanche of desperate words. "Mom, Chloe came to talk to me. I can't believe you told her all those things. You're poisoning my daughter against me. Now I'm the bad guy, after everything I've done for you. Mark says you're senile. That maybe we should take you to a doctor. You know what? Do whatever you want. If you want to be alone, fine. But don't come crying to us later. Mom, please. We need to talk. This is getting out of control." I read each message with a calmness that surprised me. The words that once would have shattered me now only confirmed what I already knew. To Susan, I was the problem. Not her ingratitude, not her selfishness. I temporarily blocked her number. I needed peace. I needed silence to think, to process everything that was happening. The next day, I kept my appointment with Aurora. I took the bus to her apartment, something I hadn't done in years. During the ride, I looked at the city with new eyes. The people walking on the streets, each with their own stories, their own battles. I realized I had spent so much time locked in my little world of family obligations that I had forgotten a whole universe existed out there. Aurora lived in an older building than mine, with wooden stairs that creaked underfoot. When she opened the door, she greeted me with a huge smile and a tight hug. "Carol, come in, come in. I just made fresh brewed coffee, the kind you like." Her apartment was small but cozy, filled with plants in every corner and photographs on the walls. It smelled of cinnamon and old books. I sat on her floral sofa while she poured coffee into fine china cups. "Tell me everything," she said, sitting across from me with her own cup. "How have you been feeling these past few days?" And so I talked. I told her about Mark's visit, his attempt to intimidate me, about Chloe and her promise to find other options, about Susan's messages accusing me of being senile. Aurora listened to it all without interrupting, nodding occasionally, sipping her coffee. When I finished, she set her cup down on the table and looked me straight in the eye. "Carol, I'm going to tell you something you might not want to hear, but you need to. You are not responsible for saving anyone. You are not responsible for Susan's happiness. You are not responsible for Chloe's future. And you are definitely not responsible for maintaining the lifestyle that Mark and your daughter have built." I know. In my head I know, but my heart. Your heart has been trained for decades to feel guilt. To believe that your value as a mother, as a grandmother, as a person, is directly related to how much you give. But that's a lie, Carol. Your value does not depend on your usefulness. Her words fell on me like cool water on a hot day. I felt something inside me begin to heal. "Do you know what I did when my son asked me to sell my house to give him the money?" Aurora continued. "I told him no. Simple and direct. He got angry, stopped speaking to me for 6 months. But you know what? He came back. And when he came back, he had learned to value me, not just my money. What if Susan never comes back? Then you will have learned something very important, that true love can't be bought. And if she was only with you for what you could give her, then she was never really with you at all." We sat in silence for a moment, letting those truths settle between us. "Carol, you are 69 years old. God willing, you have many more years to live. Are you going to spend them being the financial slave of your family, or are you going to live for yourself for the first time in your life?" "I want to live for myself," I replied, and saying it out loud, I felt a certainty that strengthened me. "I want to travel. I want to read those books I've left on the shelf for years. I want to eat in restaurants without feeling guilty about the cost. I want to exist without having to justify my existence." Aurora smiled broadly. "Then do it. Life is too short to live it for people who don't value you." We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about things that had nothing to do with family problems. She told me about the painting class she had started attending on Tuesdays, about the book club that met at the neighborhood library, about a trip she was planning to take to Oaxaca with a group of friends. "You should come with us," she said enthusiastically. "We're going in 2 months. It's 10 days, all inclusive. It costs $800. Before, I would have said no immediately. $800 was 2/3 of my monthly pension. It was an unnecessary expense. But now, with my new perspective, I saw that trip for what it really was, an investment in my own happiness. "Let me think about it," I said. But in my heart, I already knew the answer would be yes. When I returned to my apartment that afternoon, I felt renewed. It had been a simple day, without drama, without conflict. Just 2 friends having coffee and remembering that life could be light when you weren't carrying the weight of others' expectations. But the peace wouldn't last long. The next day, Saturday morning, I was watering my balcony plants when I heard loud voices in the hallway. Voices I recognized immediately. Susan and Mark. They were approaching my door, arguing with each other. I could hear fragments of their conversation through the door. "Let me talk, Mark. She's my mother. Your mother has become impossible. Someone needs to put her in her place. Just let me try to reason with her first." They rang the doorbell insistently. Once, twice, 3 times in a row. Then they started banging on the door. "Mom, I know you're in there. Open the door." I stood still in my living room, looking at the door as if it were a barrier between 2 different worlds. On the other side was my old life, full of obligations and sacrifices. On this side was my new life, the one I was just beginning to build. "Carol, open this door right now." Mark's voice sounded authoritarian, as if he had the right to demand anything from me. I didn't open it. I stayed there, in my own space, protecting my newfound peace. The banging continued for another 5 minutes. Then I heard Susan talking to someone on the phone, probably trying to call me. My phone, still on silent, vibrated on the table. "She's not opening." "Maybe she's not home," I heard Susan say. "Oh, she's in there, ignoring us on purpose," Mark replied resentfully. "This is ridiculous. I'm going to have to get an emergency key from the building manager. Leave her. If she wants to play at being important, let her. She'll see when she really needs us." Their footsteps faded down the hall, and I could finally breathe normally. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of having held my ground. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window. The sun was shining outside, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding in small apartments and wounded hearts. I picked up my phone and unblocked Susan's number, not because I wanted to talk to her, but because I wanted to see what she had to say. There were 12 new messages. The last one read, "Fine, Mom. If this is how you want things to be, so be it. But remember that you chose this. You chose money over your family." I read that message several times, feeling how each word tried to twist inside me like a venomous snake. They wanted to make me feel guilty. They wanted me to believe this was all my fault, but it wasn't going to work anymore. I wrote a reply, short and clear. "I didn't choose money over family, Susan. I chose my dignity over being used. There's a big difference." I sent the message and put my phone back on silent, because I had learned something fundamental in these last few days. Silence could be more powerful than 1,000 words. And sometimes, the best response was to simply keep living, keep moving forward, without letting the poison of others contaminate my peace. The next 2 weeks passed in a tense calm. Susan and Mark didn't show up at my door again, but the messages continued to arrive sporadically. Some were attempts at emotional manipulation, others were veiled threats, and some were simply reminders of bills that I supposedly had to pay. I ignored every one of them. Instead, I focused on something I hadn't done in decades, discovering myself. I started waking up earlier, not out of obligation, but because I genuinely wanted to see the sunrise from my balcony. I would make myself a coffee without rushing, without thinking about the 1,000 tasks I had to do for others. Just me, my coffee, and the silence of the morning. I signed up for the painting class Aurora had recommended. It was Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoon, in a small community studio 3 blocks from my house. The instructor was an older man named Antonio, with completely white hair and hands permanently stained with paint. "Art isn't about being perfect," he told us on the first day. "It's about expressing what you carry inside." I hadn't picked up a paintbrush since elementary school, more than 60 years ago, but when I started mixing the colors on the palette, when I felt the texture of the paint gliding over the canvas, something woke up inside me, something that had been dormant for a long time. I painted a sunset. The colors were imperfect, the lines shaky, but it was mine, completely mine. And when I finished it, I felt a pride I hadn't experienced in years. I also started walking. Every morning, after coffee, I'd put on my comfortable shoes and walk in the park that was 10 minutes from my apartment. I'd watch the young mothers with their babies, the old men playing chess under the trees, the dogs running freely on the grass. Life went on, beautiful and simple, without needing my sacrifice to exist. One afternoon, while walking through the market buying fresh vegetables, I ran into a neighbor from my building. Her name was Teresa. She was about 75, and she always greeted me cordially in the elevator. "Carol, how nice to see you," she said with a smile. "You look different. Did you do something to your hair?" "I just got it cut a little." "No, it's not just that. You look lighter, like a weight has been lifted from your shoulders." Her words surprised me with their accuracy. "Maybe I did get rid of a weight," I replied with a smile. "Good for you. At our age, we don't have time to carry things that don't belong to us." That simple conversation stayed with me for the rest of the day. Teresa was right. At almost 70 years old, every day was a gift, and I had been wasting that gift by carrying other people's responsibilities. But it wasn't all peace and self-discovery. There were also moments of deep pain, of doubts that would assail me in the night when everything was quiet. There was one night in particular, 2 weeks after this whole conflict began, when I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a heaviness in my chest. I got up and went to the kitchen to make a tea to calm my nerves. While I waited for the water to boil, I picked up my phone. There was a message from Chloe that had arrived about an hour ago. "Grandma, are you awake? I need to talk to you." I replied immediately. "I'm awake, my love. Is everything okay?" Her reply came in seconds. "Can I call you?" "Of course." The phone rang almost instantly. I answered and heard her voice on the other end, tense and worried. "Grandma, sorry for texting you so late. I just had a terrible fight with my parents." "What happened, Chloe? I told them I got a student loan to cover the rest of the semester. I also applied for 3 different scholarships, and I'm waiting for a response. And I told them I got a second job. I'm going to work weekends at a bookstore. That's wonderful, my love. I'm so proud of you. But they got so mad. Mom said I was playing your game, that I was being manipulated by you. And Dad said it was ridiculous for me to work so much when I have a grandmother with money who could help me. I felt that familiar anger start to boil in my stomach. Chloe, listen to me. You are not being manipulated. You are being responsible. You are taking control of your own life, and that is admirable. I know, Grandma, but it's hard. Mom cried and told me I'm destroying the family, that because of me, you two aren't speaking anymore. That's not true, and you know it. This has nothing to do with you. This is between your mother and me, but I feel trapped in the middle. I love all of you, and seeing the family divided like this hurts me. Her voice broke at the end, and I felt my heart split in two. This was exactly what I had feared, that Chloe would be caught in a conflict that wasn't hers. My love, you don't have to choose sides. You can love your mother, and also understand that what she did was wrong. Both things can coexist. Do you think this will ever be fixed? I don't know, Chloe. Honestly, I don't know. But what I do know is that I can't go back to being the person I was. I can't go back to letting them treat me like a walking wallet. And if your mother can't accept that, then maybe the relationship we had was never real. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Grandma, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever regret it? Everything you did for us? All the money you spent? The question caught me off guard. I stood there, in my dark kitchen, the steam from the tea rising in spirals in front of my face, thinking about the answer. I don't regret taking care of you when you were a baby. I don't regret the nights I stayed up singing to you. I don't regret the times I took you to the park or read you stories before bed. Those are beautiful memories that I hold in my heart. I paused before continuing. But I do regret not setting boundaries. I regret allowing my help to become an expectation. I regret not valuing myself enough to say no when it was necessary. I understand, Chloe whispered, but I will never, ever regret you. You are one of the best things that ever happened to me. I heard her sniffling softly. I love you, Grandma, and I promise I'm going to keep visiting you, no matter what my parents say. I love you too, my girl. Now try to get some sleep. Everything will look better in the light of day. When I hung up, I stood there holding the phone against my chest. The tea had gone cold in the cup, but I didn't need it anymore. Talking with Chloe had given me the peace I was looking for. The days continued to pass. It was time to make a decision about the trip to Oaxaca with Aurora and her friends. I sat at my desk with my account book and reviewed my finances carefully. Without the monthly payments to Susan, my $1,200 a month pension was now completely mine. My basic expenses, rent, utilities, food, transportation, added up to around $700 a month. That left me with $500 free each month. $500 that used to evaporate into Susan's emergencies. $500 that I could now use for myself. In 2 months, I could save more than enough for the $800 trip and have a little extra for personal spending. I called Aurora that same afternoon. Count me in for Oaxaca, I said without preamble. She screamed with excitement on the other end of the line. Carol, this is going to be wonderful. We're going to see the beaches, the artisan markets. We're going to eat the best food. It's going to be an adventure. An adventure. 70 years old, and I was finally going to have an adventure that was all mine. But before I could fully enjoy that decision, another blow came. It was a Friday afternoon when my intercom buzzed. This time, I didn't recognize the voice. Mrs. Anderson? This is Daniel Ruiz, an attorney for the Rodriguez family. I need to speak with you about a legal matter. My heart stopped for a second. A lawyer? Had Susan gone that far? What is this about? I asked, my voice trembling. I would prefer to discuss it in person, ma'am. It will only take a few minutes. Against my better judgment, I buzzed him in. When I opened the door, a man in his 40s, dressed in a dark suit and carrying a leather briefcase, was standing in front of me. Mrs. Anderson, I'm sorry to bother you. I'm here representing your daughter, Susan Rodriguez, and her husband, Mark Rodriguez. What do they want now? He pulled some papers from his briefcase. My clients have informed me that you unilaterally canceled several financial arrangements you had established with them, specifically the payment for your granddaughter's university education and the use of an additional credit card. Those weren't legal arrangements. That was me helping my family out of my own free will. I understand, ma'am. However, my clients argue that these payments were made consistently for years, creating a reasonable expectation of continuation. They have structured their personal finances based on this aid. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were threatening me with legal action for stopping giving them money? Tell your clients that there is no legal obligation on my part. I signed no contract. I have no debt to them. And if they want to take this to court, go ahead. But I assure you, a judge will see this for exactly what it is: a greedy family trying to extort an elderly woman. The lawyer's expression changed. I could see he hadn't expected me to respond with such firmness. Mrs. Anderson, no one is talking about extortion. My clients simply want to reach an agreement. What kind of agreement? They propose that you continue with at least the payment of your granddaughter's university tuition until she graduates. It's only 2 more years. In exchange, they will not seek any type of legal compensation for the money they've already invested in expectation of your continued support. I stared at him, feeling my disbelief turn into a cold, controlled anger. Get out of my house, I said in a low but firm voice. Ma'am, please, be reasonable. I said, get out of my house, now. He quickly gathered his papers and headed for the door. My clients expect a response within 48 hours, he said before leaving. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling my entire body tremble. Not from fear, but from a rage so deep it almost suffocated me. After the lawyer left my apartment, I was paralyzed for several minutes. My legs were shaking so much I had to sit down before they collapsed under me. My own daughter had sent a lawyer. Not a sincere phone call, not an apology, not a genuine attempt at reconciliation. A lawyer, with veiled threats and emotional blackmail disguised as agreements. I picked up the phone with trembling hands and called Aurora. I needed to hear a friendly voice before the rage completely consumed me. Carol, what's wrong? You sound upset. I told her everything. Every word the lawyer said, every implicit threat, every attempt at legal manipulation. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. That girl has crossed the line, Aurora finally said, with a hardness in her voice I had never heard. Carol, listen to me. You need to protect yourself. You need to talk to a real lawyer, not the puppet they sent. I don't have money for lawyers, Aurora. There are free legal services for seniors. Tomorrow, we'll find one. You are not going to face this alone. Her firmness gave me strength. I took a deep breath and felt determination replace the fear. You're right. I'm not going to be intimidated. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned for hours, thinking about how I had gotten to this point. At what moment had my daughter turned into this person, capable of legally threatening me for money? I remembered the little girl who used to climb onto my lap to have me read her stories. The teenager who cried in my arms when her heart was broken for the first time. The young mother who would call me at midnight, desperate, not knowing how to quiet her crying baby. Where did that girl go? Or had she always been like this, and I just hadn't wanted to see it? The next morning, Aurora arrived at my apartment early. She had done her research and found a legal clinic that offered free counseling for senior citizens. We took the bus downtown together. The lawyer who saw us was named Frances. She was a woman in her 50s, with thick glasses and a kind smile. She listened to my entire story without interrupting, taking notes occasionally. Mrs. Anderson, she said when I finished, let me be very clear with you. There is absolutely no legal basis for what your daughter is threatening. You have no legal obligation to financially support your adult daughter or your adult granddaughter. Gifts and voluntary help do not create implied contracts. So they can't sue me? They can try, but any judge will dismiss the case immediately. What they are doing is intimidation and harassment. In fact, you could consider getting a restraining order if the harassment continues. Her words were like a balm on an open wound. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being selfish. I had every right in the world to do as I pleased with my own money. What should I do if they contact me again? Do not respond to any communication from their lawyer. If they persist, I can send them a letter myself, making your legal position clear, and document everything. Messages, calls, visits. If this escalates, that documentation will be important. I left that office feeling stronger than I had in weeks. Aurora hugged me on the street. See? You're not alone in this. And you have the law on your side. We decided to celebrate with lunch at a small Mexican restaurant Aurora knew. We ordered enchiladas verdes and hibiscus iced tea. As we ate, we talked about trivial things, about life, about our plans for the Oaxaca trip. For a moment, I was able to forget all the drama and simply enjoy the company of a true friend. When I returned to my apartment that afternoon, there was an envelope under my door. I picked it up with shaky hands. It was a handwritten letter. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Chloe. "Dear Grandma," it began. "I don't know how to start this letter except by saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything that's happening. I'm sorry my parents have gone this far. When I found out they sent a lawyer to your house, I was so ashamed and furious. I kept reading, tears beginning to blur my vision. I want you to know that I don't agree with any of this. I told them they are being cruel and unfair. I had a terrible fight with them. Dad told me that if I kept taking your side, I would have to find somewhere else to live. So that's exactly what I'm going to do." My heart stopped. I found a room in a shared house with other students. It's small, but it's mine. I'm moving out next weekend. I don't want to keep living in a house where people I love are treated like this. I know this will be hard financially, but I'd rather struggle on my own than be a part of this. I had to sit down to keep reading. "Grandma, you taught me by your example what it means to have dignity. You taught me that true love isn't measured in dollars, and now I see that my parents forgot that lesson, or maybe they never learned it, but I did. I love you not for what you can give me, but for who you are. And I will always be on your side. Your adoring granddaughter, Chloe." The tears were rolling freely down my cheeks now. My granddaughter, my beautiful granddaughter, was leaving the comfort of her home on principle, for me, for what was right. I picked up the phone and called her immediately. "Grandma?" She answered softly. "Chloe, I just read your letter. Are you upset?" "Upset? My love, I am proud. Prouder than words can express. But I don't want you to sacrifice your comfort for this. It's not a sacrifice, Grandma. It's a choice. And it's the right one. Do you need help with the move? With the initial expenses?" "Grandma, no. This is something I need to do on my own. But I would love for you to come see my new room once I'm settled. Nothing would make me happier." We talked for almost an hour. She told me about her roommates, about how she was organizing her work and study schedules, about the scholarships she was waiting to hear about. Every word confirmed what I already knew. She was going to be fine. She was strong, she had integrity, she was everything a grandmother could hope for in her granddaughter. When we hung up, I sat on my sofa, looking out the window as the sun began to set. The golden afternoon light filled my small living room, making everything glow with a soft warmth. I thought about everything that had happened in the last few weeks. The betrayal, the pain, the anger, but also the awakening. The rediscovery of myself, the new and strengthened friendships, the freedom of living without carrying the weight of others' expectations. And now this, my granddaughter, showing me that my example had not been in vain, that at least one person in my family had understood the message, that dignity and self-love were not empty concepts, but pillars upon which to build a life. Another 3 weeks passed without any attempt from Susan to contact me. The silence was absolute, as if I had ceased to exist for her. Oddly enough, that silence didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. It was liberating, like taking off a shoe that had been pinching you for years. Aurora and I became inseparable. We saw each other at least 3 times a week, sharing coffees, walks in the park, visits to the market. She introduced me to her other friends from the travel group. Frances, a retired elementary school teacher with a contagious laugh, and Teresa, the widow who had traveled halfway around the world after her husband passed. Life after 60 is like a second birth. Teresa told me one afternoon as we drank tea on her balcony. You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. You can finally be who you always wanted to be. Her words resonated deeply with me. The painting class became my favorite refuge. Antonio, the instructor, noticed that I always painted landscapes with open horizons, beaches, mountains, roads that disappeared into the distance. You're looking for freedom in your art, he told me one day, observing my latest work. I see it in every brushstroke. He was right. I was looking for freedom, and slowly, I was finding it. I helped Chloe move on a sunny Saturday. Her new room was small, with barely enough space for a twin bed, a desk, and a closet. But when I saw her eyes light up as she organized her books on the shelf, I knew she had made the right decision. It's perfect, Grandma. It's all mine. I gave her a new set of sheets and some small plants for decoration. Not much, just enough to let her know I was there for her, while still respecting her independence. Grandma, can I tell you something? She said as we took a break, sitting on her new bed. Of course, my love. Mom came to see me 2 days ago. She begged me to come home. She said this was all a misunderstanding, that they missed me, that the house felt empty without me. And what did you say? I asked her if she had talked to you, if she had apologized to you, if she had tried to fix things. Chloe paused, looking at her hands. She got quiet. And that's when I knew she didn't really miss me. She just wanted to control me. I'm so sorry, Chloe. I know this must be hard for you. It is hard, but it's also necessary. For the first time in my life, I'm seeing my parents clearly. And I don't like what I see. I hugged her, feeling her pain, but also admiring her strength. The days continued their quiet course. I established a routine that filled me with satisfaction. Waking up early, walking in the park, eating breakfast without rushing, painting or reading in the afternoons, cooking simple meals that I enjoyed just for myself. I discovered small pleasures I had forgotten. The taste of freshly brewed coffee without thinking about the day's chores. The sound of rain against the window without worrying about anyone else. The silence of the night without waiting for urgent calls. One afternoon, while browsing a cookbook in the bookstore where Chloe worked, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated to answer, but something told me to. Mrs. Anderson? It was a woman's voice I didn't recognize. Yes, who is this? My name is Clara. I'm the mother of one of your granddaughter Chloe's roommates. My heart sped up. Is everything all right? Did something happen to Chloe? No, she's perfectly fine. Actually, I'm calling you for another reason. Chloe told me about your family situation, and I wanted to tell you something. Yes? I went through something similar about 10 years ago. My children treated me like a walking bank. Whatever I gave was never enough. Until one day, like you, I decided that enough was enough. And what happened? It was awful at first. I felt guilty, alone, like the worst mother in the world. But over time, something changed. My children had to learn to be responsible, and when they finally came back to me, they did it with genuine respect, not with their hands held out. Her words gave me hope. How long did it take? 2 years. They were 2 hard years, I'm not going to lie. But in the end, I got back both my dignity and my children. Only this time, the relationship was real. Thank you for calling me. You don't know how much I needed to hear this. Your granddaughter speaks about you with so much love and admiration. I just wanted you to know that you are doing the right thing, even though it hurts. When I hung up, tears were streaming down my cheeks, but they were tears of relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being cruel. I was being strong. The trip to Oaxaca was approaching. I already had the $800 saved, my suitcase packed, and an excitement I hadn't felt in decades. It would be my first time traveling, without having to worry about anyone else, without having to answer urgent calls, without feeling guilty for spending on myself. 3 days before the trip, the communication I had been both expecting and dreading finally arrived. Susan appeared at my door on a Tuesday afternoon, alone, without Mark. When I opened the door and saw her standing there, I noticed she looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, her hair without its usual luster. Mom, she said simply. We just looked at each other for a long moment. I said nothing, waiting for her to take the initiative. Finally, she spoke again. "Can we talk?" I stepped back, allowing her to enter. She sat on the sofa, in the same spot she used to sit as a child. I sat in the chair across from her, maintaining some distance. "I don't know how to start," she said, looking at her hands. "Start wherever you need to." Chloe left the house. "You knew." "I know." I helped her move. Something flashed across her face. Pain, jealousy, resentment. Of course. Of course you knew. Now she's your ally, and I'm the villain. No one said you were a villain, Susan. But you were unfair. Unfair? Mom, you cut off all financial support overnight. How did you expect us to react? I took a deep breath, searching for calm before answering. "Susan, do you remember what you called my 70th birthday?" She looked down. "A circus. You called it a circus. And Mark said I wasn't at an age for parties. You didn't ask me what I wanted. You didn't care that it was important to me. You just decided I wasn't worth spending on. It was just an expression, Mom. I didn't mean it maliciously." "Oh, didn't you? Then tell me, Susan, when was the last time you asked me how I was? When was the last time you invited me to a meal without asking for something? When was the last time you gave me anything without expecting something in return?" The silence that followed was deafening. She had no answer because the truth was obvious. "Never. I have paid for your life for 25 years, I continued, feeling the words finally flow freely. Your education, your wedding, your house, your health insurance, Chloe's university, your constant emergencies. Over $250,000, Susan. And never, not once, did I receive a genuine thank you. Mom, let me finish. You used me. You saw me as a resource, not a person. And when I finally said enough, when I set a boundary, you sent a lawyer with threats. Your own mother, Susan. At what point did you lose your heart? Tears began to roll down her cheeks. I didn't want it to come to this. Then why did we get here? Susan was silent for a long time, the tears falling onto her clasped hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Because you were right. About everything." I looked up, surprised. I didn't expect to hear those words. "Mark and we got used to your help. It became so normal that we stopped seeing it as a gift and started seeing it as something you owed us, like it was your obligation to keep us comfortable. And now Chloe won't speak to me. She left home because of you. No, that's not fair. She left because of me, because she saw something in me that I didn't want to see in myself." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Mark and I had to sit down and look at our real finances. We had to face the fact that we were living beyond our means because we knew you would always be there to fill in the gaps. Susan, did you come here to ask me for money again?" "No." She looked up at me. "I came to ask for your forgiveness. I came to tell you that you had every right to do what you did, and I came to tell you that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for treating you like a wallet. I'm sorry for canceling your birthday in that horrible way. I'm sorry for sending that lawyer. I'm sorry for all of it." Her words reached me, deep down. But I also knew that apologies were just the beginning, not the end. "Does Mark know you're here?" "Yes. He wants to apologize too. But I thought it was better if I came first." "I appreciate your apology, Susan. I really do. But I need you to understand something. Things are not going back to the way they were. I know. I am no longer going to be the family bank. I am no longer going to be available every time there's a financial emergency. I am going to live my life with what I have, and you are going to have to live yours." "I understand, Mom. And that's okay. It's more than okay. It's what's fair. And about your birthday," she continued, her voice trembling, "if you still want to celebrate it, Mark and I want to organize something. Something small. Something meaningful. Not to make up for what we did, because that's impossible, but because we genuinely want to celebrate you." I looked at her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to reject her offer, to stand firm in my position, but another part, the part that still remembered the little girl she used to be, wanted to believe that change was possible. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But first, I need to see actions, not just words. That's fair." We sat in silence, a silence that was no longer as uncomfortable as before. Finally, she got up to leave. Mom, one more thing. Yes? Chloe told me you're going on a trip to Oaxaca. I am. I'm glad. I'm glad you're doing things for yourself. You deserve it. I nodded, not knowing what else to say. After she left, I sat on my balcony with a hot cup of tea, watching the sun set over the city. I didn't know if Susan had truly changed, or if this was just another, more sophisticated, attempt at manipulation. Time would tell. But what I did know was that I had changed. I had found my voice, my worth, my dignity, and no one could take that away from me. The trip to Oaxaca was everything I had dreamed of and more. 10 days of crystal-clear beaches, colorful markets, delicious food, and constant laughter with my new friends. I felt young again, full of life and possibilities. One night, sitting on a terrace overlooking the sea, with a glass of wine in my hand and the sound of the waves in the background, Aurora looked at me with a smile. You look different, Carol. Radiant. I feel different. I feel free. Let's toast to that. To the freedom of living without carrying the expectations of others. We clinked our glasses under the stars. And in that moment, I knew I had made the right decisions. I had closed the circus, as I had told Susan in that message, and I was no longer the clown. When I got home, Chloe was waiting for me in my apartment with a homemade chocolate cake. Happy belated birthday, Grandma, she said with a huge smile. My love, my birthday was 2 months ago. I know, but we never celebrated you properly, so I figured it's never too late to celebrate the strongest woman I know. That night, just the two of us, we ate cake and drank coffee while I told her all about my trip. She showed me her excellent grades from the semester and told me about the partial scholarship she had secured. Grandma, can I tell you something? Always. Thank you for teaching me that self-love isn't selfishness. Thank you for showing me that it's okay to set boundaries. Thank you for being my example. I hugged her tightly, feeling my heart fill with a pure and genuine love. 2 weeks later, Susan invited me to dinner at her house. This time it was different. There were no hidden expectations, no veiled requests. Just a simple dinner, an honest conversation, and small steps toward rebuilding something that had been broken. I don't know if our relationship will ever be what it once was. Maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe we need to build something new, something more honest and balanced. What I do know is that at 70 years old, I finally learned the most important lesson of my life. You cannot love others if you do not love yourself first. You cannot give from an empty place, and you do not have to pay to be loved. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman who has survived, who has fought, and who has learned to live for herself without guilt. The circus closed, the lights went out, and I, finally, learned to take off the clown costume I had worn for far too long. Now, I am just Carol Anderson, a 70-year-old woman who is learning, day by day, that it is never too late to live with dignity, to demand respect, and to be happy on her own terms. And that, I discovered, is worth more than all the applause from any circus.